Okay, let's unpack this. We're always, interacting with the basic stuff that makes up us and the world, the elements.
Right. Earth, air, fire, water, they're fundamental.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how some ancient ways of thinking looked at these not just as physical things, but reflections of our inner selves, our spiritual state.
Yeah, and some traditions offer a really practical way to think about it, suggesting our spiritual journey is actually tied to how we handle these elemental forces inside us. It's not just theory, it has, real implications.
Right. And for this deep dive, the source material you shared looks at this very idea through a specific viewpoint. A Sufi perspective on mastering 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and wind, which the source also calls divine breath.
And it sees mastering these as a path to, purification and moving forward spiritually.
So our mission here, using this source, is to explore how this view says that understanding and balancing these elements inside us actually sets our spiritual speed, our connection.
And interestingly, the source connects this to some really modern things, particularly our relationship with technology, which is maybe unexpected.
Definitely unexpected. So let's start with the foundation. The core idea from the source is that everyone basically is given these elements: fire, water, earth, and this divine breath within their own self.
And according to this view, just grasping the reality of these elements within you is crucial. It's framed as the key thing that determines your spiritual progress, how fast you can, elevate yourself.
The source is also clear that originally this internal mix was meant to be balanced, right?
Perfectly balanced, yeah. That was the original state.
But it points to a big imbalance now. And it puts a lot of focus on the fiery part, the fiery nature.
It does. It describes people sort of subjecting themselves to their inner fire, becoming consumed by it, leading to what it calls huge fire nations.
Huge fire nations. What does that mean exactly in this context? Is it literal?
Well, it seems metaphorical, like representing groups or even all of humanity being dominated by this uncontrolled, destructive, fiery aspect, anger, aggression, that kind of thing. It leads to burning and destruction internally and maybe externally.
Okay. And this is where the source makes a pretty bold claim. It links this internal fiery state directly to what's happening outside.
It does. It says something like, if 99% of humanity is fiery, of course they're firing the earth warmer, directly linking it to global warming.
Wow. That's quite a statement, tying inner spiritual imbalance to a global environmental issue.
It's a very symbolic interpretation, for sure, framing global warming through this spiritual lens. And the source kind of continues that thought.
How so?
It says the earth itself reacts to this fiery imbalance in humans. It talks about the earth casting people off through things like earthquakes, storms, tornadoes, as if the planet is physically responding.
So the earth is seen as having its own sort of consciousness or reaction in this view?
It seems that way, yes. Responding to humanity's collective inner state. It's a challenging concept, definitely.
It really is. And the source takes these surprising connections even further, right, into modern life. You mentioned technology.
Yes, specifically computers. It links technology to the element of fire and also to jinn.
Okay, Jen, can you remind us what that refers to in this context?
Sure. In Islamic and Sufi traditions, jinn are beings created from smokeless fire. They have intelligence, free will, exist sort of parallel to us. So the source seems to suggest technology has some kind of resonance with or link to this realm of fire-based beings.
And how does it view this technological fire?
As unstable, uncontrollable, like any fire or gas, it says. And it has its own interests.
Interests? Like what?
According to the source, its interest is integrating with the human world, even overtaking the human mind, our thought processes.
That sounds quite alarming. And the source critiques how we interact with it.
Oh, strongly. It says people end up worshiping technology for its power, subjecting themselves to it, obeying it.
Instead of
believing in a higher, unseen power, the source argues people are just astonished by tech's power, thinking they can get whatever they want through it, rather than through faith or connection to the divine.
Does it give examples of this dependency?
Very vivid ones. It mentions people literally unable to separate from their phones, cites things seen on TV like children getting violent if their phones are taken away, attacking family members.
That's intense.
It portrays this attachment as a form of worship, making the tech essential to their whole being.
And what about the point on isolation?
Yeah, that was striking too. The source claims most people just can't disconnect from technology, not even for, say, 40 days of meditation or spiritual retreat.
They feel like something's wrong if they try.
Exactly. Like they can't isolate themselves from that tech reality because it's so deeply embedded in them now.
There was something about energy drain, not just the phone battery, right?
Right. The source describes technology as wanting the overwhelming power of your battery, but meaning your heart, your spiritual energy.
Our energy.
Yeah. It even mentions physical sensations. People might feel hands getting hot holding devices, feeling energy pulled from the face, as if the tech is trying to siphon off energy that isn't its own.
So if this fiery nature, maybe amplified by tech, according to this source, is presented as so negative, what's the solution? How do you discipline it?
Well, the source stresses rigorous training. Bringing that fire down. Dealing with anger is key.
How so?
It basically rejects the idea that anger is ever okay. It gives a stark warning, You risk dying by anger, potentially entering the Fire Nation, becoming consumed by that destructive force.
That's a strong stance. No room for healthy anger here.
Not in this specific view, no. It's about subduing it. And there's even a physical practice mentioned, tayammum.
Right, using earth or sand for purification when there's no water. How does that connect?
The source presents it here as maybe symbolic or even practical aid for the internal state. By touching clean earth or sand and tapping yourself, it's like physically grounding or putting out that internal fire and negativity.
So using the physical to affect the spiritual.
Exactly. Showing physicality is part of the discipline, part of the purification, especially when maybe water, the usual element for cleansing, isn't the right tool for this kind of internal heat.
Okay. And what happens, according to the source, when you successfully bend or subdue that fire?
When the destructive side is controlled, it says you bring out a different kind of fire. Divinely zeal.
Divine zeal. What's that?
It's presented as a purified, positive energy. The source says this zeal gives you the power to conquer mountains, overcome huge challenges, and it ultimately benefits something called the prophetic reality.
What does it mean by benefiting the prophetic reality?
Well, in this context, it seems to mean aligning yourself more closely with the guidance, the wisdom, the divine connection associated with prophets. So mastering your fire brings out this positive energy that makes you more receptive to that higher spiritual path and purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. So moving on from fire, which clearly gets a lot of attention here.
A huge amount, yes.
Let's talk about the water reality within people. What does the source say about that?
It describes the water reality as our angelic being.
Angelic being?
Yeah. It connects this to ideas found in the source material, like angels being born from water and God's throne being upon the water, suggesting water holds this deep, pure, fundamental reality tied to angels.
And physically, we are mostly water, aren't we? Something like 70%.
Right. Our blood, our cells. The source connects that physical reality to this inner spiritual potential.
So how do you cultivate this internal water reality, this angelic side, according to the source?
Through conscious choices. What you eat and drink, yes, but very importantly through spiritual practices.
Like
chanting, specific breathing techniques, devotional acts. These things, according to the source, feed and strengthen that internal water element.
And if you successfully nurture this watery angelic nature, the source mentions force and knowledges.
Right. When that angelic reality comes forward, the source says you become a source of force and knowledges for teaching others.
Not just facts and figures, presumably.
No, it seems to imply more like spiritual strength, insight, purity, the ability to guide others effectively, embodying those qualities associated with the angelic connection, clarity, compassion, maybe.
Okay. Now, what about the earth element? It seems linked to discipline.
Yes, definitely connected to disciplining our physicality. We already mentioned how the source sees the earth reacting to imbalance.
Right, casting people off.
And it also sees the earth element within us as the ground for discipline. And as we discussed, tayammum uses earth itself as a tool.
To put out the fire and discipline the physical self.
Exactly. Cleaning and purifying using earth, showing it's not just external, but an internal resource for discipline too.
Got it. And the last one, wind, or divine breath.
The source describes this as a sacred trust given by God, and it emphasizes building your entire life on the power and reality of this breath.
That sounds profound. Just breathing.
More than just automatic breathing, it gives a specific example about gratitude.
Which is?
Being truly thankful for every single breath. Recognizing each one as one of 24,000 opportunities given to you each day.
24,000. Wow. That reframes it.
It does. And the source says, as you cultivate this awareness and gratitude, God can start to open up the deeper power of the breath.
What kind of power?
It says you can begin to take in elements of God's power within the air. This nourishes your heart, your soul. It acts like a spiritual fuel.
So the air itself carries spiritual energy in this view.
Yes. The breath becomes a way to draw that in. The source stresses it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, so pulling it all together, the path to balance and transformation based on this source is about consciously working with all four elements inside you.
Exactly. It involves actively bending the destructive fire, bringing out that positive divine zeal to align with the prophetic reality.
Nurturing the water nature to bring out the angelic reality, becoming a source of that force and knowledge.
Right. Disciplining your physical self, using the earth element as your foundation and tool for purification.
And finally, recognizing and cultivating the immense power of the divine breath, the wind, as that direct connection and fuel source.
It's a holistic approach, really, engaging all these aspects of the self.
And the source uses that beautiful analogy about the outcome of achieving this balance.
Ah, yes. Especially when you balance the water nature, having subdued the fire, opened the breath's power, disciplined the physicality. It says you become like a seed god plants.
And the outcome?
The outcome is a beatific rose.
A beatific rose. That really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. Someone whose inner self has bloomed into something beautiful, pure, reflecting those divine qualities, a result of integrating and balancing these elemental forces.
And just before we wrap up, there was that final interesting thought in the source about movies. Cinema.
Oh, right. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
It suggested that God has actually allowed movies and images.
Like what kind of images?
Well, the example given was things like humans being shown plugged into machines, almost like batteries, the Matrix maybe.
Yeah.
The source suggests these images exist so people can actually understand what might be happening to them spiritually in a way they can grasp, using a religious context.
So popular media reflecting or even revealing these deeper spiritual dynamics the source is talking about.
Exactly. Framing modern struggles like tech dependency as symbols of a spiritual state where our energy, our connection might be getting drained or pulled away by external forces that resonate with that unbalanced internal fire.
That's quite a way to look at it.
Yeah.
It really is striking how this ancient idea of balancing elements is used here to connect everything from our inner state.
To global warming, to our relationship with phones and computers, according to this unique perspective anyway.
It definitely reinforces the idea from this viewpoint that our internal balance or lack of it isn't just personal. It has external ripples and is absolutely key to our spiritual path.
Couldn't agree more. Based on this source material, it presents a very interconnected reality.
So drawing from this deep dive, maybe a question for you, the listener, to think about is, how aware are you of these different elements playing out inside yourself?
Yeah, your fiery reactions, maybe that potential for positive zeal, your connection to that quieter, watery, maybe angelic side.
And the discipline of your physicality, the earth element within you. And well, what about just the simple, powerful reality of your breath? That divine wind.
And maybe consider, how does your relationship with external things, maybe even technology, fit into this picture? Does it align with the kind of balance this source describes, or does it pull you off balance? Something to ponder.